United States. Let's now turn our focus over to the events unfolding at the US-Mexico border. A controversial pandemic-era health rule introduced by former US President Donald Trump is set to expire this week on Thursday. It's called Title 42. Now, Washington expects this policy shift to result in a spike in border crossings. The end of Title 42 caps a prolonged legal battle between rights groups and US President Joe Biden's administration. It should be noted that Biden's administration has also faced court challenges from several Republican-led states seeking to keep the restriction in place. Title 42 was first invoked by former US President Donald Trump in March 2020, and that was on the pretext of stemming the spread of COVID-19. It has been used to rapidly expel people, and that, by the way, is more than 2.8 million times since the rule was introduced. Needless to say, Title 42 has drawn condemnation from rights groups as well. But this month, the Biden administration announced plans to send additional troops to the US-Mexico border. Of course, Biden's decision is in anticipation of the policy's expiration, one that coincides with the end of the federal COVID-19 public health emergency on May 11th, which is Thursday. Washington has also implemented measures to discourage border crossings, including expedited screenings and deportations that observers have said continue to raise rights concerns. Let's now try and get in a sense of perspective in terms of what this will mean, not just for the immigrants crossing over from Mexico, but also for the politics within the United States. Let me bring in Lauren Harper, who's a Democrat strategist, joining me live from Dallas in Texas, and Corinne Clark, who's a Republican strategist, joining me live from Washington, D.C. Many thanks to you, Corinne, and Lauren, for joining in. Lauren, if I may begin with you, while the move has been lauded by several in the United States, including the Mexican president, there are massive concerns with regards to this operational transition at the border, something that's apparent by the presence of 1,500 troops. Could this have been planned better?
Yeah, absolutely. I think we all would have hoped for more preparation, but it's really a sticky situation. So in some regards, it's like, how do you prepare for what is going to be, a serious penetration of the border? The president has really been able to meet voters where they are in terms of what his policy stance is. We know that the majority of voters want a pathway to citizenship for dreamers, but they also want investments in the border to make sure that it is secure. And we're finding that more even independent voters are wanting more investments in border control. And so I think he's just trying to meet voters where they are on, this is a democracy, and trying to find ways to meet people where they are in terms of where they stand about this issue.
All right, fair enough. Corinne, if I could bring you in on this. Now, the SUV accident in Brownsville has triggered fresh concerns over security arrangements at the border. What, in your view, should be the point of concern?
The biggest concern with Title 42 expiring is actually that this is just compounding the immigration crisis that has happened on Biden's watch. This alone is going to inspire a massive influx in immigration, but that is going to be incredibly difficult to handle when we are already facing a massive influx of illegal immigration. Under Joe Biden, we have had the most border apprehensions under any president ever, and those are just the illegal apprehensions that we have caught. We can assume that there are much more that we don't know about that have penetrated our border without us even knowing. And that has contributed to growing crime rates, to an influx in drugs, and people are paying the price for this across the country, not just in our border towns, but in the entire country. I think that is the most concerning part about this one regulation expiring, is that this has been a growing problem for the last 2.5 years, and it's about to get a whole lot worse without this one Trump-era policy keeping Biden's border in check.
Absolutely. It is a Trump-era policy. I'm going to request you both to, in fact, to continue staying with me on this newscast. In the meantime, let me also take our viewers through a detailed report, which, in fact, gives them a bird's eye view of how the Biden administration is bracing up for a sudden spike in migrants trying to cross into the United States from the Mexico border. Let's have a quick look.
U.S. President Joe Biden's administration is preparing for a potential surge in the number of migrants trying to enter the country at the Mexican border starting this week. Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas addressed his planned response at a news briefing last month.
We have been preparing for this transition for more than a year and a half. Notwithstanding those preparations, we do expect that encounters at our southern border will increase. Let me be clear. Our border is not open and will not be open after May 11th.
That's when so-called Title 42 regulations expire. The policy from former President Donald Trump's era authorized the rapid expulsion of asylum-seeking migrants during the global health crisis. And migrants have been expelled more than 2.7 million times under Title 42, a total that includes many repeat border crossers. In preparation, the Biden administration has announced measures to head off a spike in migrants, including some regulations that resemble Trump-era policies blocked by U.S. courts. The administration plans to ramp up deportations while also expanding legal pathways for would-be migrants. The new rules would also deny asylum for migrants who pass through other nations without seeking protection there first, or who fail to use U.S. legal options for entry. All this comes ahead of the 2024 presidential election that could have Biden again facing Trump for the White House. The Democrat may be looking to reduce the number of migrants entering the U.S. and blunt the rhetoric of a potential opponent who won his first race on a severely anti-immigrant message.
When Mexico sends its people, they're not sending their best.
In response to the expiration of Title 42, the Republican-controlled House of Representatives plans to pass a package of border security measures. They would put tougher constraints on immigrant asylum seekers, resume construction of a wall along the southwest border with Mexico, and expand federal law enforcement. Jorge Lowry, the managing director of programs and strategy at the American Immigration Council, sees this approach as one of conflict, not compromise, as we head into the next presidential election. Trump already debated border issues in the 2020 campaign and could do so again next year if the former president wins the Republican nomination. Trump leads his primary opponents by a wide margin in current polling.
All right, let's quickly go back to Lauren at the moment. Lauren, does the U.S. not need more humanitarian personnel like FEMA or the Red Cross on the ground than active duty troops?
Well, I would want people to understand that the U.S. military is also trained in humanitarian efforts, right? That we send people all over the world, and they're heavily trained in awesome American military bases on how to care for people, whether it's medical or psychological stuff. So even if it is troops, it's going to be empathetic American military men and women who are amazing at their jobs, and they'll be able to again provide the support that folks are in need of, and also the safety and protection of the country that we all want.
All right, Corinne, we are hearing from shelter providers that they have not been engaged on what this transition will look like until just a few weeks ago. Does the situation have the potential to turn into a far greater emergency?
Absolutely. And that is one of the biggest crises with the immigration crisis that we've had, is that this open border and this lack of security that America has actually invites a lot of tragedy into the lives of not just Americans, but of immigrants who cross illegally. They are exploited by people who will do very bad things to them to under the guise of getting them into this country. It allows a lot of terrible things. We've seen the crime, and we have seen actually the Red Cross instruct immigrants how to avoid that kind of rape and murder and exploitation that happens through these coyotes that assist people in getting across the border illegally. That is a huge crisis. We will definitely see an issue with shelter. We're already seeing that. And if the immigration numbers continue to increase as we expect, there is going to be no place for them. And that is terrible and leads to exploitation. So I don't understand why we continue to live under this lie that an open border is somehow more compassionate than a strong southern border. It absolutely is not. It puts more lives at risk and increases vulnerability of everybody involved, and it's terrible.
Right. Lauren, for Republicans, the border has become a stark partisan line, which they argue has led to unchecked borders, crime, and fentanyl to pour into cities. With such a messaging in the backdrop, what are the challenges ahead for President Biden's re-election campaign vis-a-vis the border issue?
Absolutely. Well, let it be known that Republicans are not the only people who want a secure border. There are several members of Congress and the president himself who wants to make sure that, again, American security is tight and that we have provisions for the border cities that are going to experience more people in their cities, right? It is not a super modern, super Republican issue for us to care about the border. I myself and Democrats, we all agree that there needs to be implementation of a strategy that will secure the border and also ensure that people, like I said, dreamers are supplied a safe pathway to citizenship. Again, we care about the humanitarian crisis as well. We don't want just come one, come all. Because again, it is, like as Corinne says, it's incentive for people to abuse it. And so let it be known that Democrats do want to protect the border and they do care about the safety of individuals.
All right. Corinne, how will the move impact Biden's standing in next year's presidential race, especially for the moderate voter? We've seen immigration already being used to the advantage of Democrats during the midterms.
Yeah, I think Lauren speaks to the real issue here, and she's absolutely right. It is not just Republicans who care about a secure border.
Right.
And I'm glad to see that rhetoric coming from Democrats now, acknowledging the importance of this issue. I do think it's one of the biggest issues in American politics, and we saw that in 2016, and I do think we will see it again in 2024. I think the handling of this will have an enormous impact on Democrats, not just Biden, but all together, because it is such an important issue. But I think the difference comes down to, yes, we all want a secure border, but I think a lot of Americans believe that the immigration policies supported by Democrats do not encourage that border security, whether it's a lack of funding to the border wall, or it's these programs that grant amnesty to those who did enter this country illegally, that continues to incentivize illegal entering into the United States. So I am glad to hear that we all want a secure border, but policy really matters in that incentivizing people to continue to illegally cross. A lot of people feel like that interferes with our goal of border security, and that may be what it comes down to in 2024.
Right, but you know what's heartwarming is that Lauren and you, Corinne, both have some common ground to stand on. Thank you so much for joining in, ladies. It's been a pleasure to have you on my show.